are getting by way of our top government sources is that we are going through the fine print of the trade tariff policy, which has been announced by the American president, and we are then going to take a final structured response, and we are basically sinking in, and then we are going to come out with a structured response on what really this trade tariff means. What is going to be important now to find out is that the sectors on which the trade tariff has been imposed. Has India's agro product been largely protected? Has our labor-intensive products like carpets, footwear, gems, jewelry, has that also been protected? Because that is exactly has been the crux of our negotiations as far as the trade talks between India and America is concerned. But the word which is very, very clear is, while we are looking at the fine print, the story is not over. There's no reason to be disheartened. This is a process of negotiation, renegotiations, and an American team is going to be flying down to Delhi, which was pre-scheduled. And we do expect that there would be one way open. But India has not negotiated on the benchmark of being under any kind of pressure coming in from any other countries. Very quickly, Shivani, there have been alternative plans which have been kept ready. One, of course, is looking up for newer markets, markets which have been equally hit by the trade tariffs. If we're looking at the Latin American countries, East Asian markets, that's one. Second, even the established European market, for example, the recent FTA signed with UK, that also gives us a huge vantage position. So India is not looking at backing down, but for now, the fine print is going to be studied, which is top government sources are saying, and then when they come out with a structured response.
Well, Trump is definitely doubling down as far as the justifications for this 25% tariff plus penalty is concerned, Zaka. He has made one more social media post in which he's gone on to say that we have a massive trade deficit with India, double exclamation points. In his previous social media post, he had said that India has one of the highest tariffs that America faces.
So, look, Trump has a very different view of how trade should be, how even trade, how normalized trade should be between America and its trading partners. He believes any country or any unit which has a trading surplus with the United States, that is, in his words, quote unquote, ripping off America. So, for example, India has about a $43 billion trade surplus with the United States. A large number of it is from leather, footwear, textile exports into the US, where cheap Indian labor is able to produce these mass manufactured products and then send it to America. The problem is Trump views that as a disadvantage fundamentally to America and to American industry. He doesn't view it so much so from the American consumer's point of view. Like, for example, in the next couple of months, there's going to be what is the biggest shopping season in the US, which is, the holiday season, Thanksgiving, and, Black Friday, as it were, and then Black Monday, and eventually into Christmas season. But at that point of time, whether it is Indian imports into America, Chinese imports into America, other imports from other Asian countries, those are all going to be tariffed at much higher levels. The general weighted average tariff of US imports before all of these Trump tariffs kicked in was 2.5%. That's going to go to at least a minimum of 15% for imports from the European Union, for imports from Japan, for imports from some of these, partner nations, allied, military allies of the United States. As far as other Southeast Asian countries are concerned, Vietnam is being charged at 20%, Indonesia at 19%, Philippines again at between 19 and 20%. India would be tariffed at much higher than any of these countries. Now, none of this would actually matter until we get to what the trading arrangement is going to be between America and China. Those are the two biggest trading blocs in the world, the two biggest trading nations in the world. And that has been pushed back by another 3 months. They had 2 days of talks in Stockholm, the Chinese and American negotiators, and they've decided, we haven't been able to come to a conclusion, so we're going to push back those talks by another 3 months, which means in that interim of 3 months, Indian goods are going to be charged at a much higher differential than imports from Europe or imports from Southeast Asia, imports from Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, etc., Japan, as compared to imports from India. And that is a critical concern for Indian exporters into the United States.
So he's also going on to say, the American President Donald Trump, that the August 1st deadline is the August 1st deadline. It stands strong and will not be extended. A big day for America. In his previous tweet, he also, of course, tweeted MAGA again. Are we waiting to hear for some other countries as well, which could be important in India's context? Or as you said, the Chinese tariffs are only going to be decided in a couple of months' time because the August 1 deadline which applied to India, are there any more countries, Zaka, waiting to hear from America?
So the biggest trading partners, Japan, Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, European Union, these are the biggest trading partners of the United States if you leave aside China. China, they've announced after 2 days of talks in Stockholm that they're going to sort of extend that by another 3 months. So they've got 3 months to negotiate some kind of deal with China. This is pretty much 80-90% of the trade that America does. The point then is, what is the advantage that India has, if any, in trading with the United States? As of now, India doesn't seem to have an advantage. It is still possible that between now and end of September, end of November, when President Trump is expected to come to India to attend the Quad Summit, that India can arrive at some kind of a negotiated trade arrangement with the United States. But right now, starting August 1st, which is a couple of days from now, all Indian exports, gems and jewelry, pharmaceuticals, footwear, leather, all Indian exports to the United States will be charged at a minimum of 25%. So there's going to be a great deal of uncertainty, trade, market volatility that's going to happen over the next few months until hopefully Indian and American negotiators can arrive at a better trade deal than the 25% tariffs that is hit on India right now.
Pallavi also continues to be with us. Pallavi, you have been tracking these negotiations as they have been on, and since, of course, Donald Trump adopted this posture that he has to tariff all other trading partners at the rate that they tariff America, what could be India's strategy in the interim, even as we try and work out an FTA?
Well, I mean, see, there have been always a two-pronged strategy, really, Shivani, which India has been working upon. I mean, to those who are going to say that this has come as a huge shocker and unexpected, I think there was a sense of apprehension within some quarter of our negotiators that given the mood and uncertainty coming in from Donald Trump, the figures may not be exactly as low as many in India had predicted. I mean, someone talked about 10 to 15%. 25% is a huge amount, plus a 10%, which notches it up to around 35%. But what we are told, of course, the story is not over. But just to go back to the point which you were making and asking me, Shivani, it's not that the government was not keeping a backup plan. Two things we were repeatedly told was that, one, we are looking at newer markets. I mean, markets which are equally hit by the tariff policy of America and the smaller markets. We are going to start looking out at them. We have been reaching out to them. The Prime Minister's multiple diplomatic overtures and trips abroad were not without a reason. He's trying to look for newer markets, and that is exactly what we were working upon. I'm going to try and get you some more details, even as the meeting has just got over between the Commerce Minister and Shankar. That's a quick update I can give you, because we're just going to the...
Okay. Even as Pallavi tries to get us more...
looking for newer markets. We are looking for newer markets. And the second, of course, we're looking is that FTA, for example, with UK, that was a hard negotiation and a very powerful messaging with the Prime Minister himself being there and that deal being inked in the presence of the Prime Minister. So that's a message we are sending out to the world, that don't think that India is going to stand alone on it. We do have options. We do have alternatives. But with America, we share a very good equation. And that's the reason we are hoping for a renegotiation.
All right. Vijay Sadana, economist, is also joining us. But before I go to him, Zaka, there are also these penalties that Donald Trump is talking about. Is this that 10% that he had mentioned for all countries earlier? Or is he talking about some penalties over and above for India because of that Russian oil trade?
No, so that is separate, because that's a bill that's been brought forth by the Republicans in the US Congress that has to go through the motions of, it has to be passed by the US Congress. I think we're, a fair distance from that. So that's a separate one. Right now, what we understand is that as per what the tweet and the Truth Social post that's been put by the US president, that all Indian imports into the United States will be charged at 25%, which means that India and the US and negotiators have been having multiple rounds of talks over the last 3-4 months now. India was hoping to be one of the first countries to have some kind of interim trading arrangement with the United States. That has not come to pass because if we look at the tariffs that are being levied at US partners and allies like Japan at 15%, European Union at 15%, some of the most important countries for America are being charged at 15%. And Southeast Asian countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines at between 19 and 20%. India's charge will be much higher than that, it will be 25%. And also, the critical unknown here is that China, with whom negotiations have been happening, multiple rounds have happened. The second round concluded in Stockholm. Those are being extended by another 3 months. So if the differential between Indian and Chinese imports into America are anywhere above, let's say, 5%, that makes Indian exports into the US much more at a, let's say, less competitive stage, at a disadvantageous position. So that is something we will know only in the next 3 months. But as of now, unless Indian negotiators and their American counterparts can arrive at some kind of a negotiated deal with America for somewhere between 15 and 20%, which is what Trump is offering the likes of Japan and EU and other countries, I think this is not something that India and Indian negotiators would particularly like, because it puts Indian exports at a bit of a disadvantage compared to their Asian peers.
All right, let me also go across to Vijay Sardana, economist who's joining us. Your first thoughts, is this going to be a setback, if not, for too long or for long term, but at least in the interim for India?
See, this was expected. This is not something new. Because Trump was trying to bully around India. They wanted Indian policymakers to surrender as per his wish list, and that one has to understand. So this is a diplomatic game which is going on, because there are many things. China is giving tough time to US. That is why Trump wants Indian market very badly. Now, he knows that there is no alternate to China, because China is a big buyer and supplier of US goods and services. Now, in order to compensate, if China is not playing with the tunes of Trump, and if some reason, like especially in agriculture products, if China is not accepting US terms, then where is the alternate market? So there is no other comparable market in the world like India. Like China, that the only option is India. In this scenario, it is a desperate attempt by Trump administration to access Indian market. So all these things are pressure techniques, and they know that. Unfortunately, problem with Indian export is we are only dealing in commodities. What they are buying from India, they can buy from anywhere else also. So Indian industry has to gear up. We have to become more innovative. We have to invest in R&D to access global markets. Otherwise, if we are only operating at commodities like cotton, like basic textiles, jewelries, fishery products, fruits and vegetables, these anybody can supply. There is nothing great here. So it is, we have to upgrade ourselves so that we can bargain better with US.
Could this be an opportunity of sorts? In fact, when these Trump trade business started, many industry experts had talked about how this might be the push that India needed to kind of diversify and also, of course, look at better quality exports and exports, diversify exports to other countries as well. Could this be an opportunity that really will now work out for India? But in the interim, there doesn't seem to be any ending of the Trump tariffs as far as all countries are concerned. While Donald Trump continues to maintain that India is a great friend, he's been upset that India levies much higher tariffs than US does on Indian goods, and he wants to equalize that, as he has said, with all other countries. But it is curious that the US is also kind of using this opportunity to make India the villain as far as buying Russian oil and energy is concerned, despite the fact that India's trade with Russia and India then selling a lot of that oil and energy further on helped the global economy to stay afloat and not allow prices to rise much further. Vijay Sardana, when you talk about this being a wake-up call of sorts, do you think the industry in India is ready to kind of rise up to the occasion?
See, as an Indian society, we are reactive in nature. We are never proactive. Unless somebody pushes us or we go through crisis, only then we wake up. I think this is a good signal that Trump is giving to India, that please wake up. Otherwise, you will not be there. Today, US is putting restriction. Tomorrow, Europe will put restriction. Then somebody else will do it. China is already creating problem for you. So what I'm saying is, this is a good wake-up call for Indian industry and policymakers, that the situation, the status quo will not give you any benefit. You invest in R&D, you focus on innovation like what China has done. Today, China can arm twist US. Classic example is rare earth magnets. Classic examples are other precious materials, which is required by industrial goods. Now, why Trump is extending deadline again and again for China? For a simple reason, because if China switches off the tap of supplies, US industry will be in crisis. If the same thing happens with India, what will happen to US? Nothing. You will not supply textile. They will buy from Bangladesh. They will buy from Egypt. They will buy from Turkey and even China itself. So what I'm trying to say is that unless we have some competitive advantage in the world market today, assuming that just because Trump is friend and business will continue, these are not justifiable arguments. Trump is a businessman, his friends are businessmen, he has his own agenda, he is not interested in America, he is not interested in India, his voters are American, he has to think what Americans want. So he is clear. Are we clear? Are we putting our house in order, or we are still waiting for last 50 years old archive laws, which is frustrating growth in India? That is what we have to look at it.
No, absolutely. Many economists have talked about how India needs to look at this as an opportunity to make the changes that have been long time coming or have just been delayed because of the lethargy of the Indian system. Sunil Alag, market strategist and managing director of SK Advisors, is also with us. Sunil, do you believe this could well turn out to be an opportunity for us?
No, I am turning out that, look, Mr. Trump is one who strikes a deal on every occasion. So he will change every month. He said in the beginning, now you've got 4 years, October, November he'll change. And therefore, we don't really have to worry about him saying 25% tariff on us. Because it can come down to 20% or it can go up depending on Trump's mood, really. Because he's changing every minute. Now we've just signed with UK over 10 years. And therefore, Europe is now willing to sign with us. And therefore, I turn around and say that, look, if Trump is asking us for 25%, he's equating the two. He's equating the exports and the imports on us. And therefore, we have to now, as somebody said earlier, your economist said earlier, that, look, it's a wake-up call for us against America. Now, it's US is a separate market and Europe is a separate market and UK is a separate market. We've just signed a deal with UK. We will go ahead and sign with Europe. And therefore, the whole world is going to go through a change now. And therefore, we have to now work on that.
Okay, just stay with me.
Because
Sunil, yes, just stay with me. I'm going to come back to you, Mr. Sadana and Mr. Alag. Let me just, for the benefit of our viewers, also just point out what could be India's response. Of course, there have been contingency plans that have been made, given that the US-India deal was turning out to be a pretty prickly one to work out, and it is going to take some more time. So what India can do in the meantime is look to diversify export markets and boost trade with the likes of EU, Middle East, ASEAN countries, Africa, to reduce the US dependence. We can also seize US tariff gaps with other countries like Canada, China, Mexico, as it may help Indian exports in electricals, auto, pharma and chemicals. We can continue, of course, to negotiate with US while cutting tariffs on US imports, push for $500 billion bilateral trade agreement by 2030. Meanwhile, internally, and this is where the focus will be, we can look to expand the schemes like the PLI schemes to grow domestic production in electronics, pharma and textiles, some of those that might be affected. India might also allow the rupee to depreciate for some time to make its exports more competitive in the face of the US tariffs. Mr. Alag, Mr. Sadana was talking about how Donald Trump, but we have to, of course, look at this more pragmatically.
Look, as far as I'm concerned, look, this is an opportunity for us because we have to look at UK, we have to look at EU. Now, that's the way it is going to be in the coming years. Look, India first, America is going to look at America first, and therefore UK and EU is going to look at themselves first. So each country is going to look after themselves, and therefore it's important that we also start looking over the next few years. This is not going to affect us badly right now. It's an opportunity for us to move ahead. Because as far as we are concerned, America is an important market today, but we don't rely on Americans as much as we used to earlier. Except the dollar and the rupee rate is always still the dollar. And therefore, it is important for us to think about it. It's an opportunity for us because most of the markets have to study, most of us have to study this market and see where we stand. Because the next 1 year is going to be important for Trump, as well as for us, as well as for China, as well as for UK, as well as for Europe. And therefore, Mr. Trump may move backwards or forwards depending on his entire thing. Look,
Mr. Alak, just stay with me. I want to go across to Lata Venkatesh, consulting editor, CNBC, also joining us with her insight. Lata, how is the Indian system, particularly the private sector, the business sector, expected to respond to this?
Well, this is going to be very difficult for those who are exposed hugely to the United States. We have to first of all recognize that we are not a large exporting country, and it is only exports to one country that has been impacted. So in terms of a macroeconomic GDP impact, it is not huge. But it will be very big for, say, a textile exporter, for a gems and jewelry exporter, for an auto ancillary exporter, for, engineering goods exporters. For very specific goods, it would be like, 50%, 40%, 30% of their entire earnings. So selectively, it hits. It doesn't hit the macro so much. You must remember that the biggest export to the United States is software services, and services are not part of this tariff problem. So to that extent, we are safe.
Okay. How do you expect how soon can we expect the Indian government to respond on this? Do you think they'll wait for a little bit before they can read the fine print, although they would have been prepared for this eventuality, isn't it?
I would assume they would be. This is really a political question, and your other guests may be far better placed than I am. I'm sure back channels are working overtime already. This could well be just an arm-twisting tactic of President Trump to get entry into areas where India has hitherto shut the door. Actually, India is in a politically very difficult position when it comes to food grains. We have a PDS system. We can't dismantle it for anything under the sun. We also have protection for rice, protection for wheat. So, there are a lot of markets which we cannot change at all. Trump may choose to call it non-tariff barriers, but we cannot allow certain kinds of milk, animals fed on blood meat, as it is called. We have a Hindu vegetarian community. We have a Jain vegetarian community. It is very particular about not consuming certain qualities, certain kinds of milk. And therefore, dairy, again, will be a no-no. The American position will be you actually protecting your dairy farmers. But this is a non-tariff barrier. There are all these issues which he's trying to arm twist us into giving in. Maybe because of the extreme position he has put us in, perhaps we will allow some kind of dairy product which is marked red or something, so that the consumer knows that, this is that kind. This comes. Perhaps something like that will come. Maybe the back channels are already working. In fact, I'm sure they're working.
Right. Lata, before I let you go, what impact do you reckon the markets will see because of this?
I think the markets will take it very negatively initially. Tomorrow we are going to see textile stocks, like a Gokaldas Exports or something fall. You will hear auto ancillary stocks like Bharat Forge take a hit. I don't know how pharmaceuticals will work, because pharmaceuticals is a carve out and they may not be injured immediately, but if it is also a part of the penalty, pharma companies will also take a hit.
Yes.
The steel and autos are different. Steel is coming under a separate 50%, and we are not terribly exposed to the United States by way of steel exports. So those may not be. But these pockets will be, and there will be an overall sense of disappointment. You already saw the rupee hit 5-month low today. So probably some people saw it coming. We saw the dollar become as expensive as 87.48, 87.50 almost at a point in time. We could see more of that happening because of the fear that some of our exports are going to get impacted.
All right. Lata Venkatesh, thanks a lot for joining us. Of course, we'll continue to get you more from the Indian government for their first responses. But what we are learning via sources is that even though Trump has threatened that the tariffs and penalty will kick in starting August 1, US officials are set to visit India on August 25. So discussions will continue to hammer out an agreement at the earliest. The delay is also an indication that India is being a tough negotiator since we are demanding preferential access to certain American markets, like in the case of Japan, which US officials claim have committed to investments in US with American taxpayers set to receive majority profit. US wants Indian investments that benefit Americans. According to US trade representatives, in 2024 alone, US goods trade with India amounted to $129.2 billion, comprising $41.8 billion in US exports and $87.4 billion in imports. Let me go across to my colleague Akansha, who's also joining us with more on this. Akansha, if there was ever a proof that India is not kind of bowing down to the kind of deal that may look preferential to US, I think this is that indication. But it does make the road ahead a little bit tougher when you have the sword of the tariffs hanging on you.
Absolutely, Shivani, and there's no bowing down over here to one of the biggest economies in the world, that is the United States. And to bear testimony to it is Donald Trump's own post on Truth Social, where he's talked about India's tough trade barriers. He's, of course, attacking India's protectionist policies, especially when it comes to dairy and our agro sector, which the Americans are really trying hard to break through. But you shared very crucial information that we have from our sources within the ministries, which have gone on to indicate that right now the communication between India and the United States is very much on. In fact, US officials are all set to be in India towards end of August. Reports are indicating, and what we are learning is that it could be August 25th. They will continue with the discussions, as we've seen in the case of Vietnam, Japan, major Southeast Asian economies, and particularly Japan, even in the case of EU, which is the latest trade deal that they forged as far as the United States is concerned. Donald Trump does not go ahead without a final go from the head of state. So he's awaiting a phone call with Prime Minister Modi, who he refers to as a friend. But as we've seen how Prime Minister has been extremely busy in the Parliament's monsoon session, and that, of course, takes precedence for the Indian Prime Minister. But what we are also learning is that the logistics of a phone call are currently being chalked out between Prime Minister Modi and the US President. Donald Trump is also at the same time extremely mixed about the trade deficit, that if we were to consider just previous financial year of 2024, stood at $45.7 billion with India. We've already seen how he's in fact said that it's an extremely bad idea for Foxconn or Apple to continue with manufacturing in India. And that in itself has been a major dampener for the US economy, because remember, it has also brought with it itself several business opportunities where several small Indian businesses would now be supplying goods to Foxconn for the manufacturing of Apple iPhones. And so we had seen a trailer of that when Donald Trump condemned the move as far as Foxconn was concerned. But like Japan, United States wants India also to increase its investments in the American market. But as I said, this delay is only an indication that India is not bowing down to the whims and fancies of the US president. We are holding our ground firm.
All right, Akansha, thanks a lot for joining us with more on that. We'll wait and hear from the Indian government. I think some sort of a response would be coming very soon. They do need to give a response so that the indication also goes to the market and otherwise. I'm also joined by Saral Patel, Congress spokesperson. Harsh Daya, political analyst, leans towards the BJP, and also Nirupama Soundarajan is an economist joining us. And Vijay Sadana continues to be with us as well. Saral Patel, the Congress party already latching on to this tariff announcement and criticizing the Indian government, particularly Narendra Modi's so-called friendship with Donald Trump, which hasn't really resulted in any favorable treatment for India.
We saw yesterday also, and as we have been seeing for last 100+ days, that at the drop of the hat, US president says he used trade as a carrot which forced India and Pakistan to have an abrupt ceasefire. Now, despite that, in his 90-minute odd speech yesterday, Prime Minister not even once named Mr. President Donald Trump. He should have called out his lies if that was the case. Number one. Number two, the very fact that despite this trade being used as the negotiation for the ceasefire, and if this is the deal that India is getting, it is the raw end of the deal. It is 25%, which is one of the highest in the world. They have not announced any such tariff on any other friendly countries that US trades with. So this is preposterous. This is the failure of India's diplomatic policy and as well as Prime Minister's personal relationship that he claims to share with Prime Minister with President Trump. That he has called it. He broke all the international protocols, diplomatic protocols, and called for Ab Ki Baar Trump Sarkar. He hosted President Donald Trump in 2020 in Ahmedabad right before the COVID hit. That 1 lakh people reception didn't warm him up enough. And
Okay.
despite that, this is one of the highest tariff that US has raised, and all their other friendly countries, mind you, the EU, the Japan, the China, they have managed to get a 3-month waiver. It is the failure of our Indian
Failure of the
diplomacy
Indian government. In fact, let
that
me just quote what Jairam Ramesh of the Congress party has tweeted. President Trump has slapped a tariff of 25% plus penalty on imports from India. All that tariff between him and Howdy Modi has meant little. Harsh, is this not fair criticism coming in? I mean, the entire India-US relationship, which seems to be, ascending to a greater level, seems to have come crashing down on multiple fronts.
Shivani, let's first understand the sequence of events. When Trump said that he has, mediated this particular settlement between India and Pakistan, mediated that through trade deal. Where is that trade deal that he's talking about? That is clearly a bluff. And let me make it clear that Trump cannot be trusted. He's not unreliable just with India, but also with US long-term partners such as NATO countries, European Union and Canada. He's no one's friend. ना वो मोदी जी के फ्रेंड है ना वो किसी और कंट्री के फ्रेंड है. He is an erratic businessman who doesn't understand diplomacy. Further, Trump was targeting India on buying military equipment from Russia. I want to make it clear on that as well. No country or Trump can dictate India where we'll get our military equipment from. Russia has been a reliable partner in terms of military equipment buying, and US has not shown that kind of sincerity when it comes to supplying military equipments to us. So, there is no question that he can put up to India. Why is India buying from Russia? This is like the double game that he's playing. And I'm also very sure that Trump's administration time is numbered, and his erratic behavior further proves it. This arm twisting by Trump is not going to work, and let's have trust on Modi's diplomacy and India's diplomacy. We'll surely find some way out of it, and Trump will go back on this as well. If it's, he's saying that by 1st August he will be, implementing these tariffs. But let me put it forward that by 2nd or 3rd August he'll go back on this as well. And let's be, positive that at least our biggest export, which are the IT services, are not yet impacted by this, and this will surely result in something good. And you know what has happened? Yesterday's Modi's speech in Parliament has rattled him to this level that suddenly he has raised these tariffs on India to.
Let's not go too far. There was an August 1 deadline that was anyways looming. It hasn't really come to that. There's a day to go before that. But anyways, I want to go across very quickly to Sanjay Suri, my colleague who's actually in the US right now, joining us with more. Also, Nalin Mehta from Managing Editor Money Control will be with us. Sanjay Suri, this isn't, of course, completely unexpected, but the tone and tenor of the US president certainly does not give a very confidence that much can be worked out to India's favor.
Well, that is putting it mildly. The tone and tenor are really aggressive to the point of being offensive. Just a word saying, yes, while India is our friend, and then on and on and on. This really marks a collapse in all the efforts that have been launched ever since the Prime Minister's visit to the White House in February of this year. That was a meeting where Trump held out the threat of tariffs very firmly, and that meeting did nothing to reduce anything in the announcement that Trump made. That was on Liberation Day, supposedly on April the 2nd. And since then, there have been talks, and in fact, India has been first into this attempt at working out a mini trade deal short of a regular trade deal to follow. And India has made a lot of efforts. We've had Indian teams visiting Washington, and the American trade official visiting Delhi. And we heard only a couple of days back from Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal that a great deal, he said, fantastic progress is being made in the talks between India and the US. But that has been at the level of the nitty-gritty, at the level of the nuts and bolts. The broad picture, as always, now with the US is what Trump's mood is and what his inclination is. In line with that, we've had what we've had. And really, this does mark a collapse. We can certainly hope that Trump will follow the takeover policy, that he chickens out, that he goes back on this. But at the moment, we have what we have, and this does mark a collapse. And not just at the level of trade talks. What he's brought into this is Russia. And really, the question raised finally is India's energy options, not even so much the arms from Russia, the energy
you're
options.
Absolutely right. Already there was a feeling that India can't depend on US as a reliable partner when it comes to defense trade, arms trade. But now this kind of a move by the US president on energy trade with Russia has also perhaps ruffled some feathers. Nalin Mehta is also with us. Nalin, how do you read into this entire development?
So I think if you look at the tariffs imposed on India by Donald Trump and compare it with the tariffs for comparable economies, India falls smack in the middle of that ranking. So, for example, if you compare with Brazil is 50%, Thailand is 36%, Cambodia is 36%. In the Asian neighborhood, Bangladesh is 35%. Canada in North America is 35%. India is 25%. Plus the penalties on the unspecified penalties, unspecified so far on buying Russian military equipment and Russian oil. But I think India compares much more. So the 25% is the same as with South Korea or with Malaysia, but is worse off than Philippines at 20% and Vietnam at 20% or Indonesia at 19%. The EU agreement has just been signed at 15% and Japan at 15%. So this is, in terms of what it means for Indian exporters, this of course is a serious issue for Indian exporters because the trade between US and India has more than doubled in the last decade. It's gone up to $118 billion. But the nature of that trade has also become much more sophisticated. So, for example, machinery is now 23%, used to be 7% in 2013. So two or three things. One, look at the tonality of the message. It was very clear that the negotiation was not going, the negotiation had got stalled. The fifth round of negotiations between India and US ended earlier in July, and since then there's been a sort of a pregnant silence on the India-US trade deal. Trump has now come out. I think what he has done is he's kept it at 25, which puts it right in the middle of the ranking, puts this penalty notion, but I think he's left the door open for negotiation. It also it shows two things. One, a full deal couldn't be worked out. Two, Trump has left out the door for further negotiation, and the language he's used, he's using both carrot and stick, shows that over the next week, 10 days. Again, we can't predict anything. I don't think we should get into the speculation business, but it leaves the door open for further conversation. And by calling India a friend and all of that, Trump is sort of playing it both ways at the moment.
Right. Well, more important is to watch out how India responds to this. Nalin Mehta, thanks a lot for joining us. Let's go back across to our guests who continue to be with us. Vijay Sadada is with us. I'm also joined by Nirupama Soundarajan, who's an economist. Nirupama, what could be Indian response to this? Do you think India will at all bend to some of US's demands vis-a-vis that trade deal because of these tariffs coming into effect, or will we stand firm on that?
I think personally we will stand firm for two reasons. I think first is in terms of where we have been non-compromising has been on dairy and agriculture, and I doubt whether we will actually sway from our current stance. And Even if you look at the past comments that have come from the Commerce Minister, they've been very clear saying we speak from a place of, strength. Similarly, in terms of the penalty that's been put for, any kind of arms sourcing or energy sourcing from Russia, I doubt whether this would be agreeable in terms of, whether we will also actually deviate from what we've done before. We also know that right at the beginning, we kind of told them, no, we will do what is best for India and India's energy security. I don't see that happening. Where I do see some scope is, although the language was a little harsh from Donald Trump, where he calls them a lot of obnoxious non-tariff barriers, maybe that's where obnoxious aside as a language, but maybe if the non-tariff barriers are maybe some areas where there would be some room for negotiation. But again, not on at least the sticky points that have been there since the past.
Right. Well, if this is a tactic, certainly Donald Trump, being a businessman that he is, he likes it my way or the highway. He likes to kind of arm twist you into his position. We've seen that play out in many, many situations, and this whole tariff business is playing out exactly like that. But Vijay Sadana, I want your view on this as well. While you feel that this could be an opportunity for us to internally look at and kind of diversify or change our tactics, will India at all get bullied, if I can use that term, with these tariffs?
See, first of all, you have to appreciate why Trump is behaving like this. There is also agriculture politics in America. All the swing states are predominantly agriculture states. So what China has done, China has diverted all the supplies which they were buying from America to Brazil and Argentina. Now there is a surplus stocks lying in America. They are looking for market to dump. Last time when China refused to buy, American government has to spend at least $20 billion to compensate the farmers. This time it is going to be much more. So what Trump is looking at is there is nothing called trade per se, what we are trying to discuss here. Trump is looking for agriculture market where he can dump his surplus. Now think of, other than China, which is the market where he can dump? Can he dump the remaining leftover material, suppose 20-30 million tons of soybean and corn, into Thailand or Malaysia or Philippines or Europe? There is no buyer because market size is too small compared to India. That is why he is somehow trying to arm twist India that we open up agriculture market. His political promise to his farmer is that I will give you a better deal. Look at his campaign. That is where he was anticipating. So let's not look into simply because trade or textile. He's not interested in textile or anything. He can buy from anywhere else. India is not important for him. For him, what is important is to dumping his surplus agricultural products into Indian market. Now look at Canada has banned imports. Brazil has banned imports. Mexico is not buying from there. China is not buying from there. All have renegotiated their supply sources. Left over is India. That is what we should always keep in mind, that this is the agriculture politics of America which is creating problem with agriculture politics of India.
No, I get what you're saying, Mr. Sadana. I get what you're saying.
Yes.
The only issue for India is that it cannot possibly take on US the way, let's say, China can. Our economy is not at that level. Nirupama ji, I want you to come in on this. In the interim, because India is very focused to kind of expanding its GDP, expanding its per capita income, its trade opportunities. We are very single-mindedly focused on that. And can we then sustain the pressure that US might put on us? I will take that to SC Garg, former finance secretary, actually joining us on the show. Mr. Garg, your first response to this kind of a tariff announcement, plus, the villainization of India over the Russian oil buying?
See, there are two points to it. Number one, it is targeted to pressurize India to accept American goods at 0% tariff, accept agricultural kind of goods which we are not prepared otherwise, accept their defense equipment, energy, etc., so that the trade deficit closes as far as America is concerned. Now, if we give in to this and accept all of them, the only advantage which we have America is that we are able to export to them about $80-90 billion. and maybe our exporters are able to earn about $15-20 billion out of that.
Okay.
That is the gain we have. So, but if we concede all of this, this will evaporate. That gain would be gone. So why should we accept these kind of terms from Mr. Trump and the Americans? Instead, we should be taking a line that, all right, if you don't want our goods without 25% duty, fair enough, you take it. We'll sell to you at whatever prices we have been selling. You put the duty there, let your consumer suffer, and that's your problem. So that is the way I think we should be dealing with the tariff point of view. The other issue which you raised about penalizing for doing business with Russia and all, that is our not only our sovereign right to do business with whoever we want to do, but our business right also. So if we find that the importing oil from Russia is in our interest, it doesn't matter to us whether it's in the Russia's interest also or not. But if it is in our interest, we should be able to do business with Russians and import from them. Why should Trump object to that? And therefore, we should continue to do that business.
Okay. In fact, Trump has recently suggested that BRICS countries might also face an extra levy. So, any number of issues he can bring up if he has a problem with that. But Mr. Garg, I want to ask you, how long can India, let's say, withstand the pressure if it was to hold its line that, see, this is the terms on which we can do our business and no more? Can India sustain it for all times to come?
See, what is the big loss? Suppose you sustain it. And in my judgment, American exceptionalism will collapse in next 2-3 months. But suppose it doesn't. You have to hold on to for longer, 3 months, 6 months or something. What is our loss? Our loss is that maybe our export to Americans will decline by 25% or so. That's all.
And we can make that up. We can make that up through other means.
We may or may not make it. We run $100 billion deficit with China. Right? So if we also turn into a kind of less surplus with US or a deficit, is it that existential for us?
Okay.
I don't think it is.
Okay.
And therefore, we should not be conceding. We shouldn't be appearing very weak. We should stay firm and do the business the way business is done. Not the way a person who is out to blackmail you try to make you succumb to his absolutely unreasonable terms.
Absolutely. Mr. Garg, thanks a lot for joining
Thank
us.
you.
And I think that has been the view of the Indian government as well. Maybe not in as many terms as Mr. Garg is saying, but certainly in more diplomatic ways. Bodhisattva Ganguly, Group Consulting Editor, is also joining us. Mr. Ganguly, most experts seeming to suggest it's not really the heavens falling. We can take this.
Yes, I would agree with that. The point is that, US-India trade is over 100 billion, but we can take it for some time. I think so a number of observations. One is that I think what India can do is to actually step up our own, negotiations with the EU for an FTA. That will act as a signaling device for the US that we're not dependent on them. So that's something which we can accelerate. The other thing to remember is that Trump has done this to various other countries. If you remember, for the EU, he had threatened a tariff of 30%, but he eventually settled for 15% as part of the, in the deal which was announced a couple of days back. He's also announced much higher tariffs for Canada and Mexico, but he's later backed down. So I think the way to deal with this, yes, it looks like a setback, but I think we need to be calm. And I think we should treat this as an opening gambit and then negotiate with the US and try to bring down the tariff to 15%. I'm saying 15%. Ideally, it should be 10%. But apart from the UK, which has got 10%, no one else has got. The EU is at 15%, which is one of the lowest. I think Japan is at 15%. Vietnam is at 20%. So we should aim, I think, at 15% and treat this as a negotiating. As a negotiating tactic. He's done this to many other countries. tariffs on Brazil are 50%, for instance.
How do you look at the particular insistence that US is now making very openly with its trade, attaching it to its trade relationship with countries over what, for example, was India's stand on buying Russian oil and energy?
I was going to come to that. So that's a slight, that is something which is somewhat concerning. Because if you see all of Trump's statements on Truth Social over, announcing all these tariffs, this is the first time he's referred to higher tariffs on a particular country for buying Russian oil. So what he's referring to is there is a legislation.
Yes.
Which has been proposed by Senator Lindsey Graham, who's a close ally of Trump, which is essentially calls for imposing, if my memory serves me right, very high tariffs. I think it's 500%, subject to correction, but I think it's 500% tariff on anyone who buys petroleum products and uranium for Russia. Uranium part is not important, petroleum products is, and it's aimed at China and India. And Lindsey Graham has mentioned both China and India in interviews that he has given. Now, this is the first time Trump has brought this up. So this is concerning. Now, this we have to remember, though, that this legislation is yet to be enacted.
Yes.
Right? So it will take some time for it to come into force. But if they're serious and if they actually say that if you buy oil from Russia, simply put, you face a tariff of 500% from the US. Now, that is like an embargo. Right, so that is a point of view of concern, because while the issue also is that we need our goods trade with the US might not be that much, but the US is a huge market. It's a huge market for our services, all our software exports. All the TCS and Infys of the world rely on the US market. So that's something which we'll have to be very, conscious about. So it's something which needs to be navigated.
Yes.
And we,
we'll continue to do so. Of course, the Indian government or the establishment has made it very clear that, they're in this for the long haul. There's no hurry. They will, of course, weather the storm as it comes. But Mr. Ganguly, I want to understand from you, since this whole tariff business began, experts have been talking about how the reordering or the restructuring of the trade world is supposed to take place, and this will only hasten that. Do you think the rest of the world is prepared for that, to stand up to this Trump bullying, if one can use that word?
No, you can certainly use the word. He is, he's a big, he's a very big, that's his style, that's his trademark style. And he's bullying, and certainly India has, certainly faced a bullying episode, to use language from the workplaces and all that. It's certainly but the point, but so far, but the commentary so far has actually been, unfortunately, in my view, that he's getting away with it.
Yeah.
Right. For example, the EU commissioner has been widely panned for, I think the commentary is that Trump ate her for breakfast because, because the EU's exports to the US face a 15% tariff.
Yes.
And the US gets to export 0%.
Yes.
Across a huge, range of sectors. And that's so if you look at 15%, 20% for Vietnam, 19% for Indonesia, these are, and in return, the US gets to export at 0%. So yes, so far he has got away with it.
On top of that is of course, the very vociferous MAGA constituency for him in America, which is also obviously building this up as something that is working, and therefore he's kind of doubling down on this quite a bit. Do stay with us. I do hand over to my colleague Anand Narasimhan now joining us. This continues to be, Anand, the big focus, the Trump tariff.
Yes, it is. And good evening to our viewers, and thanks, Shivani. Home Minister Amit Shah is going to be addressing the Rajya Sabha in a bit. But will the opposition try and corner the government around the Trump tariffs? Is Bharat going to continue to hold steadfast? Union Minister Piyush Goyal, while speaking with us in London on the sidelines of CETA being signed, had said that more or less the contours are ready, but it's Trump who's holding the cards, because he wants Bharat to open up and also to ease back on our energy consumption or energy purchases from Russia. Will we take to this bullying and bulldozing, Will Bharat continue to walk on the path of strategic autonomy and also choose its friends, choose with who it trades with, depending upon its own interests? Both nations wanting to push its interests